So today's going to be a very interesting session. So GitLab, as you may or may not be aware, migrated from Azure into GCP. And the goal of this session was a complete honest session of why they did it, thoughts behind it, the pros, the cons, and really help so that you can understand what a real-world company does who has a lot of customers when they're looking to do a migration of this sort and a lot of the considerations that go into play. So first, some quick housekeeping. We have something called the Dory. So the Dory is what's going to allow you to ask questions and answers throughout the event. So feel free to log into your app. You'll see right there where it says Dory Q&A, and then you can ask questions. At the end, we'll answer the questions, as well as you can come up to the mic so we can dive a bit deeper. So with that being said, let's get started. So first thing I'm just quickly going to touch on is Google Cloud's migration path and our methodology. So whenever you're doing a migration, whether it's on-prem to on-prem, on-prem to cloud, cloud to cloud, or whatever the future is going to bring, you need to have a very methodological approach, right? So the idea of assessing what's in your environment, anyone who's ever done this and tried just moving something to the cloud often breaks 20 other systems, right? So it's very important understanding technically what's there, the cost when you're going to move it, but also how all the things are interconnected, right? Because you want to move things in the right order and the right move groups. So you assess, you understand what's there. The next step is setting up your landing zone, right? So what environment is it going to look like when you come to Google Cloud so that you can begin migrating, right? So you set up things like your identity and access management, security, various policies, connectivity, maybe back to a data center or an additional cloud. Once that's all set up, then you can do the fun part, which is actually migrating and moving to the cloud. When you're in the cloud, the next step is optimizing, because usually there's a reason people move to the cloud, and there are a lot of benefits around operationalizing and taking it to the next level. So with that being said, I'm going to bring Brandon up on stage, and he'll talk a bit about how GitLab got there.
Thanks, Ted. So much appreciated.
Thanks, buddy.
So today we're going to go through a couple of things. We aren't going to talk, we'll talk a little bit about our application. We're going to talk a bit about the foundations and how we went through the process of moving over from Azure to GCP. We go through migration, and we're going to touch a little on optimize. That's almost a secondary subject, but we'll hit this in a couple details. So a couple things. My job here is to give you a context of what GitLab is for a very simple reason. GitLab.com, or GitLab as a company, we're a single DevOps tool, so we cover everything from how you go down, how software developers write software. This is what they live in all day long. They go from the planning ideas, writing their software, testing it for quality, ensuring that it has great security, packaging it up and deploying it into production, and even eventually monitoring it. So this is what GitLab does. What we're talking about today is GitLab.com. So there's two primary ways that we think of a business. We have GitLab.com, which is our SaaS offering, and that's what we're going to spend most of today around. We also have GitLab that most of our customers, the majority of our customers still love to manage their own tool set. They run it in their VPC, on-prem, on GCP, in Kubernetes, all the above. So those are kind of the two different worlds. What we're going to do today is walk through what the migration was for us on our SaaS platform. So as we go through it on the SaaS platform, it's important to have some context on where we're going and what the business drivers were for us as a SaaS provider. That said, here's some context for us as a company. So we've been incorporated, we're now about 5th year. We have 500 employees, 50+ countries. We are a fully remote company. So there's not a single office in anywhere of GitLab. You're going to get some context as to how that works. We have very, very broad adoption. So our business strategy is a strategy called user-based open core. So if you're interested in this, you can take a look, search it on Google, search our CEO, Sid. He talked through all the different models that an open source company has to consider. And it is one of the more challenging pieces to solve. And this is what we're trying to get to. You get some pretty good context here from a growth. So same in terms of what we're dealing with from a growth standpoint. We're now pushing about 10 million repositories running on GitLab.com. So big repositories. As we made the move, some of what you need to understand with GitLab is we also have a whole bunch of other tool pieces in here that matter. So if we go back to this and take a look at your pipeline. Well, we're now running everyone's pipeline, and that's a very big use case. That's a lot of compute that requires that you do it really well. So all of these, as our customer base grows, is critical for us to do it. We obviously move pretty quickly. We have about 2,200 regular code contributors. We ship every month. And from that standpoint, we also have another 10,000 total contributors over the time that have worked with us. Now, Again, well, this is a meta process. So what you're going to see is we took GitLab as a tool. That's where we live. That's what we breathe. GitLab is used as a migration tool to migrate GitLab.com. So I'm going to give you a little context of what GitLab is, because you're going to have to understand what we had to optimize to in order to deliver it. So to that end, the prerequisite slide, I'll just give a little context to this. This is just all the different organizations that care. Well, why does that matter? Because for us, more and more of them are running on a SaaS offering. More and more of them are looking in either running or considering a run on GitLab.com. It has to be mission critical. We have to deliver this perfect every time. But at the same point, we use the exact same code base to run GitLab.com as we do ship to our customers. And that's quite different. So that methodology is both a plus, but it also means that we have to meet, it allows us to dog food the entire process through. Our focus for our customers is, you'll see what we do, our customers like Goldman Sachs. So Goldman spent for us, they moved over to GitLab, came on with about 1,000 employees focused on really optimizing and changing the way they develop. They're obviously a good development company. Is anyone from Goldman here? Okay, if you ask anyone from Goldman, like, they're a software company. That is what they do. When they tackled this initially, they said, okay, we'll go with 1,000 users. We're going to roll that out. We'll get into 9 months to a year. We'll let you know in 9 months to a year how it goes. Inside of a month, they needed another 5,000 licenses because they rolled it out to everyone. So easy for them to roll it out. We need to make that sure that works really well for GitLab.com as well, right? So that process critical to our business success. Couple things here, I'm going to lay some context. These are our core values. We believe deeply in the notion of collaboration as an open source company. Couple things here, because I'm more interested in showing you how this works. When we say that we believe in collaboration, one of the important things you want to know is, hey, who do I need to work with? Well, for reference, if you're interested, GitLab.com, we publish our entire org chart. So you're going to know who you want to work with, how, where, et cetera. So in order to do that well, obviously, we need to be able to be very, very efficient, and we also, of course, will get into this a little bit around the transparency. Now, the efficiency and cycle time, this is something that matters in what we did, and it matters to our customers. So both of these are really critical in being able to build software quickly. We've all heard Mark Andreessen say software's eating the world. Got it. The more interesting thing is, his most current point is cycle time compression may be the most underestimated force in determining who are the winners and the losers in tech. This is the core of what a digital transformation is. And for us, we've got to do this because, as you saw, while we're a 500-person company, that's wonderful. We're doing great. We enjoy it. And today, I'll be very blunt, Microsoft's our biggest competitor. With that, our superpower at GitLab is a very simple thing. We will iterate faster than anyone. If we can do that well, we succeed. If we don't, we lose. Full stop. And our customers expect the same. Couple other fun things here that are always worth looking at. On a transparency standpoint, let me make sure we do this. Let's do this. It's always interesting to say, hey, what's the roadmap look like? So from this standpoint, if you're ever interested exactly on how we ship all of GitLab, and again, GitLab, a full tool, end-to-end suite, we publish our entire roadmap, right? We publish exactly when we're going to go, where we're going to go, what ships when, and it's full feedback. So regularly, when we're looking at deciding and prioritizing, is anyone GitLab customer? Okay, thank you, awesome. If you guys want to prioritize where you want a next feature, it's an issue. It's open. It works with everyone in the world. And we obviously value that. That's something that allows us to move much, much faster. One area here that I'll probably look at, we also look at transparency just as a culture. So I'm going to give you this a little bit. This is a handbook. Any startups in the room? Okay, anyone ever tried to deal with a remote culture? How do you manage a remote culture? What are the right processes? This right here is a handbook that the majority of YC companies that want to go, this is a handbook. It's 2,000 pages on everything how we run the company. So we literally write every single thing down. Because we're 100% remote, decisions aren't made in a room. They're not made over a water cooler. They're made and start in an issue. We live in an issue. We iterate an issue. And we move that quickly forward. So in this, to give you a sense of just sort of a little bit different than maybe the world works, anyone been in the black art of acquisitions? You probably haven't been. If you have been, like part of what my job is, decided to maybe take this a little bit different. We decided, you know what would be great? Why don't we go ahead and give everyone an exact idea of how we go through acquisitions. And we'll go through, I can't drive this as well backwards as I would like to, but we go through and tell exactly, hey, any company that would like to work with us, here's exactly how we would work. Here's how your first days would work. Here's how we value you. Here's how we would bring you in. And so that transparency is something that, again, works across here and the rest of the company. So let me jump back in and click the next one because the values are useful. This is what we had to deal with. We started as a company more or less in this create space. So when we had to run our SaaS offering, we're only needing to deal with Git. It's interesting. It's really powerful. It's our core. But now as we've expanded and we deliver this level of complexity, we have to be able to, at a regular basis, be able to run that for every single customer. So that means we have to run pipelines. It's going to mean that we have to have a great managing. We have to manage and run all of this extremely well. So companies expect to be able to, they live in a silo, and when they come to GitLab, they're asking, hey, how do I break down those barriers? How can I run and develop concurrently instead of sequentially? That was an issue for us. It was a surprise for us. So as we went through the process here, we used to, of course, have a bunch of other tools too, because we only started in the Git space. When we moved on to planning, CI, monitoring, we were surprised actually ourselves when we put these things all together exactly what the compression of that cycle time was, which is wonderful. But when we run that product now as a SaaS for every customer, that thing better run perfectly every time. Because they are betting, our customers are betting their business on GitLab.com as the ability to ship product every single day. So that's the part that we had to make sure we executed perfectly. One other thing, we talked a bit about transparency, which obviously matters, but you're gonna see a theme here throughout. That's fine. I'm gonna move to the next slide here real quickly. Give a little context of what we had to migrate over. So when we moved over, we had to move everything from the source code, but we had to move all the Kanban boards. We had to move our project management. Likewise, we wanted to roll out when we made this, we want to make it easy to do things like, if you look right in the middle, review apps. We want to make it easy for our customers to be able to deploy a new app, see exactly how it's running instantaneously. And so that was the last part we did there. That said, I'm going to quickly get it over to Andrew because you guys want to know why we moved over. We're going to spend most of our time, some people will know GitLab is the left-hand side here as an end user. That's mostly what the UI UX is. Today, the rest of it, we're going to spend on this part. How do we migrate all the different pieces of the complex application that is GitLab? Couple really important things that we focused on. First off, we want it to be suitable, obviously, for mission critical. That's really important for us to grow our business. We needed performance, we needed consistency, and price. That was the reason we moved from Microsoft. We saw better performance, we'll highlight that, better consistency, and significantly better price. The other part, if you're thinking about the other part, was culture. So more and more development is landing in cloud native. You're here, you've heard this all day, you heard Anthos, I don't have to explain any of that. However, for us, when we want to work with a partner that's going to help us understand and work deeply around those technologies, there's not a better place for us to go than was Google. And so that was part of why we moved. Last one was, and that hit in part 2 and part 3. So part 3, a lot of those are technologies that while we use them very deeply, the advantage of for us as a company working with Google early, was we have real deep insight into how that works. Likewise, Google uniquely was willing to walk us through exactly how Google developers develop. So we get a kind of a future look into perhaps how other large companies, or probably one of the fastest shifting companies in the world, actually does their DevOps lifecycle. That said, the last one I'm going to turn over to Andrew here in a second. And last one I think speaks pretty much for itself. We're a small company. In doing so, we're going to write all up about it. Andrew's going to tell you how we did it, and I think that's pretty helpful for us. So with that, I'm going to let Andrew chat. This is probably who you want to talk to. And much appreciated.
Thanks, Brandon. My name is Andrew Newdigate. I'm an engineer at GitLab. I helped lead the team that moved GitLab.com from Azure to GCP. Now, Brandon told you a little bit about why we wanted to move to GCP, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we did it. And I need a clicker. Cool. So the goal of the project was really, really simple. It's basically move GitLab.com to GCP. So we could state it really simply. The problem was, how could we go about doing this? Now, Brandon discussed our company values earlier. I'm going to try to illustrate how we use these company values to apply them to the way that we work. And in particular, I'm going to focus on efficiency, or how we love boring solutions, iteration, or how we focus on shipping the minimum viable change, and finally, on transparency. So the first iteration of the plan was really a combination of a really boring solution and a minimum viable plan. So we considered whether we could just stop the whole site, copy all the data from Azure to GCP, and then switch the DNS over to point at GCP, and then start everything up again. So the problem is that we had too much data to do this within a reasonable time frame. So we had, at the time, about 0.5 petabytes in total of data on Azure. And once we'd shut down the site, we'd need to copy all of this data between 2 cloud providers over the internet. And then once the copy was complete, we'd need to verify the data and make sure that it was all 100% correct. And only then could we start the site up again. This plan meant that GitLab.com could be down for several days on end. And considering that thousands and thousands of people rely on GitLab on a daily basis, this didn't really work. So we went back to the drawing board and started considering what our options would be. So around about the same time, we were working on another feature at GitLab, and that's called Geo. And what Geo allowed us to do is develop a feature for our enterprise customers so that they could replicate a GitLab instance from one site to another. And this is really useful because you can use it for faster access at the second site. It's also redundancy, and you can use it for off-site disaster recovery. So Geo works by doing an initial synchronization of all of your data from the first site to the second site. And then afterwards, it makes sure that everything is synchronized so that any change on the first site is replicated to the second in near real time. So you always have a duplicate copy of your data. Now, GitLab.com is not a fork of GitLab. GitLab.com is GitLab. And so Brandon mentioned that on the 22nd of every month, we do a release of GitLab. And the first place that that release is deployed to is GitLab.com on the 7th of the month. So 2 weeks before we release the software, we deploy it on our own servers on GitLab.com. And we even use the same package installer called GitLab Omnibus to install onto GitLab.com. And this means that any feature that we build for our self-managed customers is also available for us to use on GitLab.com. And so we hope that by utilizing these replication capabilities that we were building for Geo, we could migrate the entire GitLab.com site from, to a secondary instance in GCP. So a new plan was formed using Geo for replication, and the secondary environment would be GCP, as I mentioned. And then what we'd do is synchronize all the data, and this could possibly take weeks, or it could take months. It didn't really matter, because the site would be available throughout the synchronization process. And then once all the data had been synchronized from to GCP, we could verify it and make sure that it was all 100% correct. And then we could just promote the GCP environments as, and make it our new primary. This had many advantages over the initial plan. So obviously, firstly, GitLab.com would be up for the synchronization. And then we would have a period of downtime, but it would be very short, maybe an hour or two. And the other thing that was great about it is we could time box it. So we could know exactly how long that downtime was going to be. Then, since the new environment, we were running all of our production data. We could verify it. We could do QA. We could build automated QA tools, manual QA tools. We could do load testing on it. And obviously, we could verify all of the data before the failover. And then finally, because we had this migration, we could use the migration as an opportunity to do ultimate QA of GitLab Geo. And so basically, if it could work for us on GitLab.com, it would pretty much work for any other customer who wanted to use Geo. And we could be confident in that. Just going to quickly grab.
That goes back to the iteration and the testing. Yeah. And that goes back to our value of iteration, testing, dogfooding. We make sure before our customers touch it, we're going to make sure it runs great, and then it gets into the largest deployment in the world, which means if you're running it yourself, you can be fully confident that that's something that's ready to go.
Cool. So around about this time, we were actually working on another major project, and that was called Cloud Native GitLab. And this project is basically about building a set of Helm charts for GitLab so that we could deploy GitLab inside a Kubernetes environment. And much like Omnibus is our official package installer for installing GitLab outside a Kubernetes environment, the Helm charts in Cloud Native GitLab is our official installer for installing GitLab inside a Kubernetes environment. So instead of provisioning the new environment using Chef and Omnibus, we thought maybe what we could do is deploy it into Kubernetes using Google Kubernetes Engine and our Helm charts. And so we evolved the plan with another iteration so that we use Cloud Native for setting up the new environment. The problem was that this approach, it became apparent that there were problems with this approach as we went along. So the changes that we needed to make to GitLab.com, and at least to GitLab the product, were extensive, and we realized that there was going to be some major rework. And so it was difficult to align the timeframes of the Cloud Native GitLab project and the GCP migration in order to get them both delivered within the timeframes that we wanted. So we went back and we sort of went to the next iteration where we went back to using Omnibus for provisioning the new environment. But we also realized that it would be worthwhile to migrate as much data as possible to object storage with Google Cloud Storage. And so obviously a lot of the data on GitLab is Git data, but there's also a huge amount of non-Git data, sort of build artifacts, CI repositories, CI images, that sort of thing. And what we could do is take it off NFS, where it was stored, and move it into object storage. And doing this would allow us to reduce the risk and the scale of the geo-migration. And additionally, moving that data into object storage and eliminating NFS from our stack meant that in future, when we moved to Kubernetes, it would be much easier because we didn't have to worry about NFS. So the steps for the migration were now fairly straightforward. We would provision a new environment with GitLab Omnibus, and we would set it up as a geo-secondary in GCP, and then we would replicate all the data from GitLab.com in Azure to GCP. We'd wait for the initial synchronization to complete, and then when it had completed, we'd test the new environment with automated manual testing tools, and we'd obviously verify that all the data is 100% correct. And then finally, once that's done, we'd fail over to the GCP environment, promote it to primary, and we'd be done. So obviously, so we began to set up the new environment, and we started the replication process, and we started replicating non-Git content to object storage. Now, being remote means that we can't spend our time playing sword fights in the hallways while we wait for things, so we used the time to be productive, and we started implementing other features in our new environment. So we set up identity-aware proxies for all of our internal web apps. We set up Cloud Key Management Service for security. And we also did a major revamp of our logging infrastructure, moving to structured logging wherever we could, and switching to FluentD and Google PubSub for logging. And for short-term logging, we use Stackdriver and Elk. And for long-term logging, we stored our data in Google Cloud Storage. So there was only one major unknown left in this plan, and that was the actual failover operation itself. So unfortunately, Geo at the time didn't support a failover operation. So nobody knew exactly how we would go about doing that. So we needed to define a step-by-step plan to carry out this failover. Now, considering the stakes were so high, it was essential that we got this right the first time that we tried it. And how did we ensure this? Well, we just kept on iterating. So we set up a failover procedure as an issue template in GitLab, and then each step in the failover was a checklist item. And then we started practicing the failover, and every time we did a practice, we'd create a new issue from the template, we'd run through it, and anything that went wrong would get fed back into the template as a merge request. So the whole team would have a say, and we could discuss it on a merge request, and through this very tight feedback loop, we could like rapidly improve the failover procedure. So this animation over here shows the main failover documents. And there were over 140 changes in that document. So every time we tried something, we would submit a change, and over time, the document got longer and longer and longer. And the entire, when we started, every time we tried it, it would basically not work. But every time we did it, we'd improve it a little. And we kept doing this until we were totally confident that the failover would work. And then when we were confident, we actually introduced another level of difficulty by starting to mess with the failover, having somebody secretly shutting down servers or rebooting Redis or shutting down our Postgres primary. And then the team would have to recognize that it happened and take it into account, detect it, and improve it, and then carry on with the failover. And once we were doing that, we knew that we were totally confident, and then it was time to carry out the failover. So we let Google know, and they assembled an amazing team to help us with the failover. Sorry, just going to grab some water.
One fun note on that previous slide. If you're ever interested in exactly how that works, it's an open issue. So anyone that's interested, you can watch exactly how we cut it over. You can go look on exactly how we went through that process. And so you're going to know detail by detail, ad nauseum, what that kind of work takes. So if it's something you all are trying to solve, again, we put all our documents out there because we want to collaborate and help everyone else along the same journey we've been, and obviously get your feedback, not necessarily on the cutover, that's long been since done, but in the rest of what we do. So it matters an enormous amount to us. Hopefully that becomes something also that's a usable document. And I think pretty unusual that a company is live stream how they make the migration, as well as giving everyone else visibility on how you might be able to do it yourself.
Cool. Oh, sorry. So I skipped a little bit further. So Google assembled an amazing team of people to support us on the day. And we knew they'd be available if we needed any assistance. Luckily, the failover went really smoothly, and we didn't experience any major problems. On the Monday following the failover, as traffic started rising on the site, we started seeing some performance issues. And working with Google, we realized that our GitLab servers, which run all the Git operations for GitLab, were struggling a little bit. And we spoke to Google. They suggested we move from N1 high mem 8 machines to N1 standard 32 machines. And so we rotated the fleet out to those. And after that, it was plain sailing the whole way. So going back to the goals of the project, did we make GitLab.com suitable for mission-critical workloads? So firstly, let's consider availability on GitLab.com. And so as an external tool, we use Pingdom to monitor the site externally and tell us if it sees any failures. And so I pulled the data from Pingdom from before when we were in Azure, and then afterwards when we were in GCP. And this is a graph of the number of errors we saw per day in those two environments. So that is a few months before, and that is everything after the failover. And the blue background, I'm colorblind. I can't see it being blue in this image, but hopefully it is. The blue background is the period when we were running in GCP. So prior to our failover, we had about 8.2 Pingdom errors a day. And after the failover, we had just 1 error a day. So Pingdom also reports availability. And this, you can see, is our availability in the year leading up to the migration. It was 99.61%. And afterwards was 99.93%. Now, some people might think that those two numbers are really similar, but they're not. 99.61 is 39 minutes of downtime a week. And afterwards, we've seen 7 minutes of downtime. So we still have some improvements to make, but it's a lot better than it was. So the other way that we can compare the sites is with the performance of GitLab.com before and after moving to Azure. So one way that we can do this is with Latency Histogram, which shows us the performance of requests to GitLab. And what I did for this was I took data for 1 week before the migration and 1 week after the migration, so that there weren't too many other changes to the application. We were pretty much comparing like with like. And what you can see is that the GCP line drops off much quicker and has a much sort of lower tail of values. And so what this shows us is that our GitLab instance in Azure was slower, and our GitLab instance in GCP was much faster. And we also had far fewer sort of unpredictable values. So random values that took 30 seconds, or random requests that took 30 seconds. And then finally, we have, like as Brandon said, we have all the documents. We have the issue tracker. We have the project documentation, all available over here for everyone to take a look at.